Hospital patients are being burnt alive, still attached to their IV tubes, on camera, and nobody does anything about it. Nobody lifts a finger or even a word against it in the corridors of power of Western countries who are making it all possible, arming it, funding it, propagandizing for it, and diplomatically covering for it in the United Nations and elsewhere. The Al-Aqsa hospital is just the latest outrage. The Jabalia refugee camp in Gaza is now an extermination camp. It's gone from a prison camp to a concentration camp and is now an extermination camp. And the journalists pretend not to notice. Not a word is coming out of Jabalia refugee camp. Not a sign of life is present, and nobody does anything about it. Apartment blocks are reduced to rubble and ash in the capital city of an Arab country, Lebanon. Damascus is being bombed. The state of settlers and colonialists, led by the criminal Benjamin Netanyahu, is openly intriguing with the United States of America to widen the war still further, to make violent, aggressive attack on the Islamic Republic of Iran, which will be answered, of course, tenfold, 100-fold, maybe 1,000-fold, plunging the entire region into a state of total war, involving perhaps, quite likely in fact, the superpower backers of the settler state of Israel, involving the United States first and foremost, but also its reliable satrapies, its vassal states like the United Kingdom, like Germany, and like France. And if that superpower bloc gets involved, who will say that the superpower friends of Iran, Russia, and China will not join in also? Are we really looking at World War III to defend Netanyahu's right to massacre hospital patients, to massacre small children and women, as he's been doing for an entire year? Hundreds of thousands out of a population of 2 million Palestinians in Gaza have been murdered or maimed, amputated, blinded, eyeless in Gaza. But the real eyeless are the political class and the journalistic class in the Western countries that are making it all possible. They're the real blind. And the question is, are they turning their faces away, or can they simply not see? Why can't anyone, neither the International Criminal Court or the International Court of Justice or the United Nations, whose own peacekeeping soldiers are now being gassed and shot and shelled by Netanyahu's forces, why can nobody do anything to stop Israel when every international law, every international convention is being brazenly broken right in front of your eyes? There are none so blind as those that will not see. If you want to debate this, you have come to the right place. This is Have It Out with Galloway. Ashish Prashar is a political strategist, human rights activist, TEDx speaker, and award-winning executive. He is a former Middle East envoy advisor and a passionate proponent of social justice, launching award-winning prison reform campaigns that produce legislative change. Ashish began his career in journalism and moved over to politics, working for the British Conservative Party becoming the youngest press secretary ever for the Mayor of London in 2008. The Middle East Peace Envoy, I can barely bring myself to say his name, Tony Blair, later tapped him to join his team as an advisor. During his time with Blair, Ashish created and launched an innovative micro-lending campaign for small businesses in the West Bank of the occupied Palestinian territories. He also provided strategic counsel to Obama and Biden's presidential campaigns, focusing on getting out the vote among the formerly incarcerated community. Ashish, with a CV like that, you and I would not often be found on the same platform, but I'm wondering if what has happened since has caused you to reconsider that these people were never serious about peace. They were never serious about peace with justice, which is, of course, the only kind of peace you can possibly have.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, George. I mean, I think for me, my eyes were opened. I think like everybody else growing up, I knew Palestine was occupied. I think naively in my late 20s, when I was tapped up to do the Envoy's role, I, like anyone who thinks they can make a difference, right? I thought, well, if I'm at the table, I can make a difference. Having spent time in the West Bank, like you have and others, I quickly realized that the Envoy's job, and frankly, the organization that set it up, which is America, Europe, the UN, its only role really was to continue to help Israel enforce its superiority on the Palestinian population, enforce supremacy on the Palestinian population. We'd go into meetings with both like the Palestinians and the Israeli leadership, and we'd come out with just one story to support the Israeli narrative. I soon quit right after that because it was like everything you truly believed in politics. Because I was not unaware of Tony Blair, of course. Like we all knew he was a war criminal from Iraq, but you thought some people might want to redeem their legacy or change their legacy in a new role. And given his history with the Good Friday Agreement, you thought, okay, maybe he's trying to do something. It didn't take more than 6 months, George, before I left the role.
I wonder if I did speculate myself at the time as to whether or not he was seeking redemption. For a day or two, I thought that might be the case. But it's clear now, isn't it, that all these things, the so-called Middle East peace process, the so-called Abraham Accords, they're all just window dressing, aren't they? Because none of them are ready to address the fundamental question that there used to be a place called Palestine, which has been wiped off the map.
Well, so I think the Abraham Accords were pretty clear. They were economic things to make Israel okay in the region. I think they were the least problematic because they were just really transparent about how bad they were. We could all see straight off the bat that they were designed to build economic relationships that were unbreakable between Arab states and Israel. So there could never, ever be any problem for Israel in the region with its neighbors, right? If you tie them with economics, they're not going to rise up and actually support the Palestinian people. I think everything before that you laid out, George, from Oslo to the Middle East peace process to every body that was designed to help create that Palestinian state was a fallacy. It's a lie. It was literally all designed to give Israel the ability to create the state, hold on to their state, and even expand their state in some cases. Like when we were there with Blair, we could see settlements. In 2011, they didn't even hide the settlements. Again, we were privileged that we were in diplomatic cast and we could bolt the way through the West Bank. But even with them going 100 miles per hour, getting you in and out of checkpoints, you could see the abuse, the atrocities, the injustice, the treatment of Palestinian women, the beatings of children and things like that. If you had a conscience, you don't stay in that role. And you could see that everything that was designed post-Oslo, for example, was designed to take out any Palestinian resistance, take out any possibility of a Palestinian state. And it was all backed by Western governments. And that was the frightening part about that.
Yeah, it might make you feel better if I tell you that I supported the Oslo Agreement and I supported the Oslo process. But that too, as you say, was all based on a lie. Because Israel cannot give civil and political rights to the people under its occupation, because then the Zionist politicians would be outvoted. They cannot, therefore, officially annex the West Bank and Gaza without thus confirming that it is an apartheid state, because you've annexed a territory, but you've not given rights to its people. It cannot ethnically cleanse the entire Palestinian population, which is almost as big as their own population. Although what we're seeing in Gaza now seems to indicate that this iteration of the apartheid state's government may indeed be going to go the whole hog and try to transfer the entire population to Egypt, to Jordan, to anywhere else except their own country. Do you think they're ready for that? And would anyone stop them? Doesn't seem like it, does it?
Well, I think I recently did an interview going, the only thing that's going to protect the Palestinian people is the combined force of the resistance. I think there is no moral Western values. I think people have values. Our governments have given up on those so publicly, because they are not looking. They're looking and they're okay with what they're seeing. Their value of life, of brown bodies, whether it's Arab, Christian, Arab, Muslim, Arab, whatever, is the value in those bodies is nothing to them, and they don't care. The idea that we have a prime minister in the UK who is a former international human rights lawyer is laughable at this point. It also makes you wonder what type of human rights he was actually protecting. But they can only do all of this with the United States. Europe is irrelevant, weirdly, in this. Like the United States, if for example, the United States stepped out of this, George, you and me know that the UK hasn't got a leg to stand on. Europe would put its tail between its legs and run off, because it does not work without its sponsor, the United States. And the interesting thing to me is, like, for me, that has to all be signed off. This is the president, this is the vice president, this is the cabinet. They have signed off on Israel's expulsion and extermination of everyone in Gaza, and they should all, this country, there are all the people talking about Israel being kicked out of the UN, Israel needs to be sanctioned, boycotted. Yes, all those things need to happen. But the United States needs to be removed from the United Nations. The United States is acting like a terrorist nation right now. It's led by terrorists, frankly. And what people don't seem to realize, the people that are ignoring this, the public that are ignoring this is what our ruling class is going to try and deem as normal for the rest of us. This is a message to anyone who uprises against the US, capitalism, whatever, and European quote unquote values, that we will just end you. I mean, this is what they're doing, because they've never seen anything. You and me both know there's been genocides, there's been atrocities, ethnic cleansing happen all over the world, but never has it been done in such an audacious way, so publicly. I mean, the soldiers themselves are TikToking their exterminations of Palestinian women and children. We have all the evidence in the world, and our institutions aren't acting on it. They're not acting on it because they are funded, bought, and owned by the United States, who've okayed this genocide. The only thing stopping the Palestinians from being completely eradicated are Hamas, are Hezbollah, are Yemen, are those people who are resisting. Our job, whether you are in government or not, is to stop everything that our governments are doing to support that, whether it means blocking docks with that are shipping weapons, whether that is if you're in a union in Southern Europe, where you're starting to see in Spain and Italy, refusing to load any Israeli ships, whether in the United States you can do direct action, because voting is not going to change anything in the United States. Both parties are all in on this genocide in the United States, both the Republicans and the Democrats, right? In the United States, do everything you can to not pay your taxes, boycott anything that helps this government run. Our job is to resist our government. The resistance's job is to protect the Palestinian people, because we're not going to do it. Don't ask our government to do it, because they have given up any moral authority on this subject.
The signs are that the resistance is still alive in Gaza. There are still almost daily significant security incidents, as the Israeli media are forced by censorship to refer to them, and of course spectacular resistance from the Northern Front, from the Lebanese resistance. The air-to-surface missile fired from a drone over Acre just the other day was possibly the most audacious resistance operation of the war so far. Israel has not been able to enter more than 100 or 200 meters into Lebanon. The resistance is proving that notwithstanding the killing of its top leaders in Lebanon, the resistance is fighting on, and fighting perhaps with even more zeal than it may have done if those killings had not taken place.
Well, I think Israel assassinating Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah was the biggest mistake they could have made. And I'm not saying that he wouldn't have gone a bit more all in now that they were invading on the ground. Of course, he was going to defend Lebanon. He defended Lebanon in 82. He defended Lebanon 2000, 2006, and has won every time. And he would have won again. I think they're arrogant, and Western arrogance, thinking they're going to take out a leadership, not realizing that these people are fighting to protect their land. And this is what resistance is actually all about. And it's also why it's enshrined in international law, arguably by the way, the French and the Americans after World War II, because they were occupied, right? The French wanted resistance in international law because they understood occupation. People who are occupied have the right to legally resist, armed or any other way they see fit, by any means necessary, to resist their occupiers. The Lebanese are never going to let. And that's also when we've referred to Hezbollah. Hezbollah are doing the majority of the fighting. But the reality is, like, they're defending Lebanon. And now they're defending, and also they were only engaged on the northern front because they were defending Gaza. And they said they would stop. Remember this. Hassan Nasrallah said he would stop if Israel stopped exterminating people in Gaza. What more righteous act could you leave? It puts the Western leaders at shame when you think about their actions. Now, in terms of militarily, Israel doesn't stand a chance against Hezbollah. And look, they picked a fight where they can bomb everybody else in a concentration-sized camp in Gaza. And they're mostly killing civilians. They're barely killing a Hamas fighter. They are mostly killing civilians, women, children, men who are nothing to do with any of this. And that's what they decide is victory. And you know what the funny thing is? Mostly Hamas and Hezbollah and even Yemen hit military targets and are called terrorists. Really, the question is, our media is framing the good guys as the bad guys and the bad guys as the good guys at this point, right? People mass murdering a population where we're talking about numbers in 200,000, 300,000 people dead. 2,000 people killed in Lebanon in a day, by the way. That's more than what they supposedly killed on October 7th, right? And by the way, Israel killed the majority of those people, which is now well documented that they used the Hannibal Directive to murder their own people so they weren't taken hostage, right? So they've done all these atrocities, and yet they're the good guys. We've got two resistance organizers, 3 or 4 resistance wings who've hit military targets, barely touched the civilians' hair on their heads, and they're the terrorists. We really are being lied to by the ruling class of the United Kingdom, the United States, and in Europe. But I also think people can see through it. It's whether they choose to act on it. The resistance is going to win. Israel will not exist in its current, the Israeli occupation in its current form will not exist. People are leaving Israel, the Israeli occupied territory of Palestine, in record amounts. What you're actually going to be left with is the IDF and crazy settlers who are willing to die on that land, the land they've stolen, mostly in the West Bank, as you've probably seen from things like the Hilltop Youth that occupy a lot of those settlements. Like, they are armed like the IDF and are backed by its military and the Israeli government. What you're going to be left with is the extreme settlers, the IDF, and a radical Israeli government via these resistance groups across the Middle East. That's all that's going to be left, because every other Israeli is tucking their tail between their legs and running for America, where they're actually from, or running back to Poland or Europe, where they're actually from, because none of them are from Israel.
Ashish Prashar, it's been a rare pleasure talking with you. Thanks for joining me on Have It Out with Galloway. Let's go straight to Lebanon on the video wall and talk with Patricia Teleb. Patricia, the last time we talked, this had all just begun. The bombs and missiles were flying everywhere. Now they're flying in both directions. The resistance is putting up a remarkable fight, isn't it?
It truly is. Truly, the resistance is the pride of the Lebanese people. It's a thing that the Zionist entity is really trying to break our morale, and they're trying to get our people to actually let go of resistance. They're playing on a lot of sectarian cards, hitting displaced people in different places all over Lebanon in an attempt to get some sort of sectarian conflict. We've had people that are getting kicked out of the houses that they've rented, or the schools that they've rented, because people are afraid of them. It's trying to spread terror and make even the displaced people of the south uncomfortable, but they're still holding on to their resistance. And even last night, the operation in South Haifa, this is actually an even bigger testimony to the fact that diplomacy will not work. And we know as Lebanese people that our hope is the resistance, and there's no hope in diplomacy. We saw the Americans want to exercise their fake diplomacy in a way of instilling regime change so that we can have some sort of diplomatic talk and slaughter can end. But the majority of people in Lebanon do see that the only way that we can keep our land, the only way that we can have our rights, and the only way that we can support our brothers and sisters, our dear brothers and sisters in Gaza and in all of the occupied territories, is through arms. There is no other way. And anyone that actually says otherwise, I think at this point is either blind or a complete fool.
Have you actually seen physically any Israeli invader yet? Or am I right that they actually have not penetrated Lebanon more than 100, 200 meters? Am I right about that?
They haven't. We definitely have not seen an invader. They know how to bomb us only from the sky and to threaten us. But we have not seen any invaders. It's insane. We have some days where there's 6, 7 operations where they try to enter, and the resistance quite literally slaughters them. The issue is that there's a lot of propaganda from the Israeli side where they never admit. If you hear 13 killed, normally it's about 100. If you it's sometimes in the triple at least, where you hear about how many people are suffering on the other side, how many of the terrorist organization that is the IDF. But in general, they have not been able to do anything. They have bombed. It's insane. The villages near the border are leveled to the ground. And I mean, they're leveled to the ground. Like some villages are 80-90% destroyed. And we still see people, resistance fighters coming out from them and stopping the IDF army. And it shows this colossal failure that is the IDF, that they only know how to actually spread horror and terror and how to spread images of destructions of civilian buildings, but they have not been able to achieve anything. And their tactics of trying to horrify us as civilians so that we can turn on our resistance are going to be just as much of a failure as their pathetic attempts at a ground invasion.
Now, they imagined that by martyring the Sayed, that this would weaken the resistance. But in fact, as any fool could have told them, it has made the resistance fight with increased zeal. These are, of course, the party of God. They believe they're fighting for God. They're doing God's work. Their leader is now in the sky with the Lord. Why would that make someone fight less well? It's a very big miscalculation, isn't it?
It is. I think that the issue that Sayyid Hassan used to constantly talk about, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, is that this particular government, and in general most Israeli governments, but this particular government is very arrogant and narcissistic. And the United States has always looked down on us as Middle Eastern, and they've always thought that working with harshness and spilling blood is going to work. But they keep on failing to understand our core ideology, and especially the Lebanese resistance in Lebanon. We believe in Karbala deeply. And the Battle of Karbala was when the entirety of the family of the Prophet, the entirety of the small army of Imam Hussein was slaughtered. And the revolution, the Husseini revolution, the revolution of Imam Hussein continued. And this is one of those things that they just cannot get through their minds, that Imam Khomeini very eloquently explained, kill us and our people are only going to grow more aware. I've seen with my own eyes women that are asking God that may all of our sons go, but Sayyid Hassan come back, because of the deep love that we have for the Sayyid. And it did break our hearts. It did break the resistance fighters' hearts, that there's no doubt. because the way that the people of South Lebanon and the people of Baalbek, and in general the people of Lebanon, love Sayyid Hassan, is not like anything that any other leader has experienced, or any other people in the West have actually witnessed. We still saw the death of the Queen, for example. We saw the different views, but now when the war ends and when we watch the Tashia' Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, they're going to watch how the people of Lebanon will all sit and cry tears of blood in the millions on the streets of Lebanon. But despite that, and despite this great harsh blow that this was to our hearts, this does nothing but to commit the Lebanese people to fight more loyally and to stay on the path that this great Sayyid has paved out for them. So this is one of those, again, colossal failures that the Zionist entity think, because the revolution is not alive just because of one person. And the ideology has been there for 1,400 years. So this idea that some sort of arrogant fool is going to come and wipe it out with one person, we as Shiites, all of our imams have been martyrs up until our last imam. May God hasten his reappearance.
Wow. Well, may God preserve you. That soliloquy will live forever. Thank you, Patricia. Now, Yasmin is in Gaza, and therefore, for security reasons, she's sent in a pre-recorded question. Let's hear Yasmin. Go ahead, Yasmin.
Hello, Mr. Galloway. I'm Yasmin Murtaja from Gaza. I got married shortly before this genocide. Our lives were almost perfect until this war took everything from us. We used to have a stable life, a beautiful home, and wonderful memories. But now we have no home, no dreams, no hope. We have nothing left, only a small tent without the basic necessities of life and with a lot of suffering. Actually, we have been displaced and suffering many times since our home in Gaza was destroyed. Do you think this nightmare will end? And do you think we will survive this genocide? And will we be able to rebuild our lives?
Well, I don't really know how to answer that. As I said in my opening remarks, Yasmin, the world has turned away, not the citizens of the world. There are many millions of citizens in Western countries that have been focused on this genocide right from the very beginning. But sadly, most of them are not in any position to do anything very much about it. Same is true in the United States, particularly amongst the young people. And all over Western Europe and elsewhere in the Western world, there are millions of citizens deeply engaged and enraged at the sight of you standing amongst your tents, which, depending on when you sent that video, may have been amongst the tents that were melted and all the people in them incinerated just last evening. The truth is, the powerful in Western countries are with Israel. And as my guest Ashish said earlier, all we can do in the West is make that more difficult for the powerful in our own country. I'm afraid your fate is now intimately tied to God's will and to the action of the resistance fighters seeking everywhere to defend you. David Atherton is in London. He's a journalist. Let's hear from him. David, welcome.
Thanks for having me on again. I was going to ask you about whether the Arabic countries should sign the Abraham Accords, but you kind of dealt that earlier in the show. So let me ask you a slightly different question. What would be your reaction to, I read in the papers recently that if Donald Trump gets into power, gets re-elected in 2024, Saudi Arabia may sign the Abraham Accords. If that is the case, I believe Jared Kushner, his former son-in-law, has stayed in touch since he got booted out at the last election. So do you think, what would be your reaction, as I say, if Saudi Arabia did sign the Abraham Accords?
Well, if my auntie had a beard, she'd be my uncle. Saudi Arabia will not sign any recognition of Israel until there is a Palestinian state with Jerusalem as its capital. And that's quite a high bar. And this has been stated over and over and over again ad nauseum whatever Kushner thinks, whatever Trump thinks, that is the position of Saudi Arabia. I'll be meeting MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, in Kazan later this week. And I'm certain that, to me, he will reiterate what the Saudi government has said throughout, that they will never recognize Israel until there is a functioning Palestinian state with Jerusalem as its capital. Now, I don't believe that Donald Trump is going to be either willing or able to force Netanyahu to allow such a thing to take shape. So there will be no recognition of Israel by Saudi Arabia because the Saudi government is on a different course now. The fact that I'm meeting them in Kazan, in Russia, at the BRICS conference, should actually speak volumes to you. Imagine the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia in Russia for the BRICS conference. Saudi Arabia is lost, man, and Kushner and Trump are going to have to deal with it. Hala Murtaja is another viewer from Gaza. And again, for the same reasons of personal security, we've asked her to pre-record her question. Hala, please, what's on your mind?
Hello, Mr. Galloway. How are you? I'm Haya Murtaja from Gaza. I'm a singer and voiceover, and the most importantly, I'm a mother of 2 girls under the age of 5. My question is, how can there be human rights organization and child-saving organization in the world that are unable to stop the suffering of the children of Gaza and protect them from killing, hunger, ignorance, and all types of displacement?
Well, again, I'm almost speechless, Hala. There are many things that have been exposed in the last 12 months. One of them is the true nature, for anyone who wasn't paying attention before, of the settler colonial state itself. Another is the role of the media in Western societies, which is not a fourth estate holding the powerful to account, as some were told at school that it was, but is intimately a part of the war machine that is Western power. The journalists now stand in greater opprobrium than they have ever in the entire history of the profession. Virtually nobody pays any attention to anything that they say. And I'm sorry to say that the United Nations, the UNRWA, the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice have all been equally discredited. But to turn to your question, these NGOs that said they were in business, often big business, to promote human rights, to promote women's rights, to promote children's rights, clearly regard Arab children, Lebanese children, Palestinian children, children in Gaza as children of a lesser God. That's the only explanation that there can possibly be, because otherwise they would be tearing down the corridors of power all over the Western world. They would be disrupting parliamentary sessions. They would be buttonholing politicians everywhere, screaming at them. The human rights brigade in Western countries were really just lipstick on the pig of Western power. They are a Trojan horse in many places, but they are of no use at all to the children and the women of Gaza. Mohammed Salim is in Prague, in the Czech Republic. Mohammed, welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Mr. Galloway. It's been always pleasure talking to you, and thank you so much for everything you are doing. My question is, when do you think China and Russia are gonna get involved in this war, which is leading towards World War III? And secondly, how can we educate the people in Europe in to larger extent, because they usually believe whatever US says. For example, if they will say Hamas is terrorist, they believe Hamas is terrorist. If they say Hezbollah is terrorist, they believe in it. And if they say Taliban are terrorists, then they believe in that also. But they don't realize Taliban were created by US against Soviet Union. They don't realize there was no Hezbollah before Israel tried to invade Lebanon, and you were there, as you mentioned, and there was no Hamas before 1948 and 1967. So how can we educate the people in Europe to recognize the true terrorists? Thank you.
Actually, there was no Hamas until 1987. That's how recent Hamas were. And Israel tried to help them to be born, to act as an alternative pole of attraction to Yasser Arafat and his PLO. That's another example of these spectacular misjudgments made by Western governments. Now, the question of Russia and China is, of course, a sensitive one. The president of Russia met the president of Iran in Turkmenistan just a couple of days ago. I don't know what they discussed, but I'm pretty sure that what is going to happen next will have been number one on the agenda. The Russian defense minister is in China this day on an unannounced meeting to meet the military and political leadership of China. The Chinese Navy has encircled Taiwan today in a military exercise. Hundreds of Chinese fighter planes are in the air around Taiwan. We are sailing, if you will forgive the pun, into very dangerous waters. I don't speak for Russia, for China, or for Iran. This is my own personal hypothesis. If Israel attacks Iran, attacks its nuclear industry, attacks its oil and gas industry, tries to eliminate its political leadership, then Iran will respond in literally overwhelming force. What you saw the other week will be perhaps 1,000-fold, and all civil infrastructure, all military infrastructure in the state of Israel will be destroyed. At which point, Israel, in exercise of the Samson option, may seek to launch a nuclear strike against Iran. In which case, somebody, either Russia or Iran, will probably launch a nuclear strike back. Fra Hughes, my old friend, many times with me in Gaza, is in Belfast. Fra, what do you got to say today?
Hello, George. How are you, buddy? You've basically just answered my question, but I'm gonna ask it anyway, and maybe you could expand on it. I wanted to ask: have the Zionists got the appetite for a full-out war with Iran, bearing in mind the damage Iranian firepower can unleash on the infrastructure of the apartheid state? Is Netanyahu considering the destruction of Iran with American, French, German, and UK participation for his map of the new Middle East? And can Iran survive long enough by just targeting military and critical infrastructure while the racists in Tel Aviv obliterate Persian civilians in their thousands? As this appears to be their template for war, every Arab or Persian is expendable in pursuit of Zionist expansionism and not for Zionist security, as they claim.
Well, I don't think in the end killing civilians will ensure that one side or the other would prevail. They've killed a lot of civilians in Gaza, but the resistance continues. They've killed a lot of civilians in Lebanon. The resistance has redoubled. They have killed many Iranians and may kill more. But if you destroy all of Israel's civil infrastructure, if instead of 178 ballistic missiles you fire 1,780 or 10,780, Iran has hundreds of thousands of ballistic missiles, then you're going to destroy everything that makes Israel a functioning state. You're going to leave it with no electricity. You're going to leave it with no running water. You're going to leave it with no roads or railways or airports. You're going to leave it with no extant military bases. And even if all of the political leaders and all of the public are in air raid shelters, they're going to emerge from those air raid shelters into a country which effectively is no longer functioning, and no amount of Western aid is going to easily address that. So to answer your first question, I'm not sure that Israel does have the stomach for an all-out war with Iran. Unless they have completely taken leave of their senses, I think myself that they may seek to avoid it. Charlie Sansom be the last caller. I suspect he's in Essex and is a political commentator. Charlie, last word to you, my friend.
Hello. Tony Blair has said that countries such as Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have shown leadership in differentiating between religion and politics, and why those two things shouldn't mix. I think he was intimating that the separation of those two power pillars may lead to peace in the Middle East. Do you agree with him?
I don't know whether to laugh or cry, Charlie. You did hear my earlier answer. I am meeting MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, in Russia in 5 days' time, where Saudi Arabia's membership of BRICS, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and now scores more countries, including all of the countries of the axis of resistance, including Iran and Saudi Arabia, in the same bloc, will be meeting in Russia. You can amuse yourself with the idea that Saudi Arabia is ever coming back to your side of the fence. You can amuse yourself by thinking that the United Arab Emirates, a petrol station with a flag, is capable of showing leadership to anybody, never mind the 350 million Arabs from the Atlantic to the Gulf, who, by the way, are not fighting for religion. They're fighting for humanity. They're fighting for the land that's been stolen from them. They're fighting against the slavery of the empire. They are fighting because they are Arabs as well as Muslims. So the idea that you can look to Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates as a template for the Middle East you personally would like to see is for the birds. I do have time for Dr. Ray Higginson in Wales. Dr. Ray, go ahead.
Hi, George. Another good show. Just a quick question. How prepared do you think Iran is for any potential war with the West? Do you think they're prepared?
I absolutely think that if Iran is attacked by Israel or by its parent body, the United States of America, that Iran has the means to defend itself and has the will to defend itself. It's not the size of the dog in the fight that counts, Ray. It's the size of the fight in the dog. And Iran is, in any case, quite a big beast. 90 million people with a military-industrial complex that is now a wonder of the world. There's a queue a mile long to buy Iranian weapons, as I'm sure you have noticed. And Iran has very important friends, not just Russia, not just China, but Iraq, but Yemen, but Syria, but Lebanon, but the resistance inside Palestine. Iran would make Israel pay an inordinate, unbearable, unpayable price if Israel should decide to attack it. If the Americans join in the attack, Iran will still have the means to defend itself, but it will have to ask its friends its nuclear armed, hypersonically armed superpowers, Russia and China, to come to its aid. In which case, Dr. Ray, we better not plan anything special for Christmas, because we might very well not see another Christmas. The question for Western citizens is, are they really prepared to allow their government to take all of us into nuclear oblivion for Benjamin Netanyahu? Really? Would anyone in their right mind want to die for Benjamin Netanyahu, for Ben Gvir, for Smotrich, for these crazed, unhinged, illegal land thieves on the hills and mountainsides of occupied Palestine? Seriously, Ray? Your children, mine, their children, children yet unborn, snuffed out, no more human life, no animal, no vegetable, no human life anywhere on the planet. What, for Benjamin Netanyahu to defend his right to murder Palestinians in their hospital beds by fire and lead? I personally think Western people are sleepwalking into what might be a very bad good night. Well, it's been marvelous for me. I hope it was for you, and I hope you like the novel idea of the callers being seen on screen in the show. Many of the people on the wall turn out to be people with preconceived ideas that suit their political agenda. Some of them hate me, and that's why they're here. I don't mind. What I say is, come and have a go. If you think you're hard enough, come and have it out with Galloway. Have it out with Galloway. You can be on that wall next time. If there is a next time, if the war doesn't intervene before then. Thanks for watching.